If you've been on this Nintendo Switch Online adventure with me, then you'll know that there have been some long stretches where Nintendo just didn't release anything. Now, with only a few weeks left to go in the year, suddenly we can't go a day without Nintendo announcing something new. Just one day after revealing the release date for Tetris, they give us Donkey Kong Land 3 on the Game Boy. And that's not all, because Japanese subscribers, or those who can cleverly switch regions, were treated to the Game Boy Color remake from 2000. Yeah, that's cool news. But is this game actually worth playing? To answer that question, I decided to flip through the pages of Nintendo Power, Gamers Republic, and more classic magazines to see what the critics said back when this game first came out. Oh, I sure hope you're ready to complete the trilogy because we're going bananas in this episode of Nintendo Switch Online Review Crew.
Het oerwoud staat op zijn kop.
Ja, en wij doen lekker mee!
Klaar voor de derde ronde?
Ja, ik doe mee!
Donkey Kong Land 3 met Dixie Kong en Kiddy Kong. Het geniale vervolg op de leukste platformgame ooit. Donkey Kong Land 3, nu voor je Game Boy en Game Boy Pocket.
Released in late 1997, it's easy to view Donkey Kong Land 3 as the last gasp of the original Game Boy. The trilogy really helped to keep the aging portable alive and thriving as the competition dropped out one after another. The days of monochromatic graphics were clearly coming to an end. Just 1 year later, Nintendo would once again revise the handheld with the Game Boy Color, something that allowed them to shift the focus back to franchises like Super Mario Bros. And The Legend of Zelda. But look on the bright side, this third and final Donkey Kong Land game was the most daring and ambitious one yet. It deviates from the home games and actually adds some new ideas to the mix. Let's see what the magazines were saying about the game 27 years ago. Once again, we don't see a whole lot of critics racing to review this third Game Boy game. Electronic Gaming Monthly, for example, skipped the entire Donkey Kong Land trilogy. And really, the reviews for Nintendo's aging handheld were thinning across the board. Thankfully, we can rely on Nintendo Power to review the game, though they couldn't muster up a score higher than a 7.1 out of 10. They argued that this is the best Game Boy Donkey Kong game to date. The main characters stand out clearly from the backgrounds, and the animation is smooth throughout. They also liked the excellent game control, saying that it captures the feel of the Super NES Donkey Kongs. Over in Australia, Hyper liked the sequel a lot more than Nintendo Power. They gave it an 82%, raving about the levels, but complaining that the lack of challenge means that it won't have much of a shelf life. Donkey Kong Land 3 is fun, looks great, and plays much like the Super NES version. The only problem is there's nothing really new or worth salivating over. Too familiar and too easy. Bring on Project Atlantis. Now, in case you don't remember, that was going to be the Game Boy follow-up Nintendo was working on that was supposed to come out in the mid-1990s. Speaking of which, it's worth mentioning that Nintendo released a version of this game for the Game Boy Color in 2000. Sadly, that version of the game never came to America or Europe. But hey, Gamers Republic did review it and they gave it a B+. That said, they were a little disappointed that it wasn't more colorful. Graphically, although the animation is impressive all around, I did find the colors somewhat lacking, which is my only grievance with Dinky Kong and Dixie Kong. Each character is relegated to one hue, and some of the backgrounds are very washed out. I'm sure the Game Boy Color's pony power is going instead to sprites and animation, however, so this is to be expected. DK and DK is a must-have import Game Boy Color release. Alright, now let's return back to the original 1997 release that we got here in the West. If you're looking for the highest score, then let's pull out the January 1998 issue of the official UK Nintendo magazine. Giving it a 92%, they were one of the few that actually noticed just how overshadowed the Game Boy was. After what has been a deluge of Nintendo 64 games over the past few months, here's something that'll please all you Game Boy fanatics out there. Donkey Kong Land 3 is just what game-starved players have been waiting for, and Rare has done wonders with the Game Boy's limited memory size. There's enough platform action here to keep you glued to the small screen for ages, and you'll be tearing your hair out in frustration as you try to find all the hidden bonuses and coins. All the elements of Donkey Kong Land are here, which just goes to show that you shouldn't mess with a good thing. The Game Boy title is just what we've been waiting for. You'll be hard pushed to find anything better this year. Look, this is a great example of going out on the right foot. With an average score of 82%, this third installment is just slightly behind the 86% that we saw from the original, and ahead of the 75% that critics gave the more divisive middle chapter. If you've managed to go through the other two games in the last few days and you still want more, then Donkey Kong Land 3 is definitely worth checking out. Just don't expect much new or different.
Game Boy Color.
あ、ドンキーがゲームボーイやってる。
あのドンキーコングがゲームボーイカラーで新登場。
なんか喜んでる。
なんとディンキーのスペシャルカード付きゲームボーイカラー専用ソフトドンキーコング GP。
Hey, thanks for watching me break down these classic reviews. If you liked what you saw here, then you'll be happy to know that we post new episodes just like this every time classic games get added to modern consoles. In fact, we just posted a Tetris-themed episode yesterday. You know, because apparently Nintendo's just releasing things at random these days. Oh, and there's also a playlist, so check it out. Now, here's the question I have for you. What Donkey Kong game is coming next? I mean, look, Nintendo is clearly slow dripping these Donkey Kong games, so I have to imagine that we're probably going to see Donkey Kong 94, Donkey Kong 64, and maybe Diddy Kong Racing in the coming weeks. I suppose they could even give us the Game Boy Advance port of Donkey Kong Country. Let me see your predictions in the comments below. In other news, we're going to be back later this week with a review of Anton Blast. If that sounds good to you, then I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then,